Hey everybody, welcome to LTG Live. My name is Eran Holt, and I am joined by my good friend and co-host, Mr. Peter Reeves, the one and only. How are
What
you, my
is
friend?
going on, my man?
You doing good? You doing
Doing
good? I
well.
like it. I
Doing.
like the vest, the hat, man.
Oh, we're
It's a
Michigan
good
people. It's cold already.
all the time and
Yes,
already. Yeah,
but I'm doing real
absolutely.
good, man, because the Lakers won last night.
Yes,
Big
our boys.
Brown had 28, 12, and 8. Let's go,
Whew.
people.
They
You know.
they showed up, man. I was nervous. I was texting my son the whole game. I'm like, ooh, this is driving me nuts. This is crazy. But yeah, man. You know, it's funny. We're going to talk with our guest who we'll introduce in a moment. We're going to talk today about grit and how to grow grit in your life. And I was thinking, like, we watched some grit last night. Like, we
we
saw some
did. We
grit,
did.
you
We
know,
did.
which is really, really good. So, now this is going to be a great topic today. And a bunch of you are joining us right now. But listen, if you have never been with us before, again, we just say welcome to the LTG Live podcast. Some of you join us weekly on our live stream. Some of you join us afterwards on the podcast, which you can find on both Apple and Spotify platforms. And so if you're connecting there, thanks for being a part. And this podcast and live stream is brought to you by leadthegeneration.com. Woo! That's who we are, Peter. And you can check us out at our website. We resource, train, equip youth pastors all across the nation.
Yes.
And we have the privilege of supporting you, cheering you on. And hey, if you love what we're doing on this live stream, give us a like on the Lead the Generation Facebook page. Give us a share. And for those of you that are with us right now, give us a shout out in the comments. We want to see who you are. We want to welcome you. We want this to be a conversation, not just with Peter and I and our guests, but with you as well. And so all throughout today's broadcast, go ahead and drop some comments in there, put some questions in there, things that will help us engage with you, which will be real great. So,
Definitely.
Peter, before we introduce our guest, which I'm going to let you do, I want to let you know next week, Wednesday, we'll be back to our normal time because this week we had to back it up an hour. That was my fault, by the way. I'll take responsibility for that. But next week we'll be back to our normal time, Wednesday, October 14th, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And next week, Peter, a good mutual friend of ours, Steve Tripp, who is the District Youth Director for the Assemblies of God in the Wisconsin Northern Michigan District, will be joining us.
Yes,
and
sir.
we're going to have a great conversation with him. But today we're joined by another Wisconsin native, right? And another good friend of both of ours.
Yes, yes.
So it's so good to welcome today's guest on there. And Reggie Hill, you just did it for us, right?
Yes,
You
the
got
man.
Jon Brown on the show today. We're excited that you're with us. And so come on, everybody, let's welcome him. Jon
Brown.
I just stole your thunder, Peter, but go ahead and introduce him anyways. He's here.
We're talking about the next gen pastor at Journey Church in Kenosha, Wisconsin, Chicago, outside Chicago, if you have some people in Chi-Town. But whatever, Jon Brown, ladies and gentlemen.
There he is.
Nice.
That's what Reggie told me when he went there. He said, I said, you're moving to Wisconsin. He said, I'm moving right outside of Chicago. Just so you know.
It's a suburb of Chicago, actually. Crazy. We're in Wisconsin, but we're considered a suburb of Chicago. So I'm going to claim that all day long, just to let right alongside Reggie.
Yes. Yeah, do it. Why not? You know what I mean? I mean, it sounds a little nicer, I'm going to be honest, than saying you're from Kenosha. It's like, Keno what? It's weird, but.
Well, everyone knows where Kenosha is.
Everyone knows now. Everyone knows where Kenosha is now. Absolutely. Absolutely. And Jon, welcome, man. We're glad you're with us. It's good for you to join us. We're glad you jumped in, and we appreciate. Jon, you were last minute. We really appreciate it. We had a change to our show for today. We announced last week that Chris Estrada was going to join us, and he is, but it'll just be a little bit later in this season. And Jon, I texted you and I was like, bro, do me a favor, and so this came together, but I'm excited about today's topic, right? Because today we're going to be talking on this topic right here, growing grit, right?
Yes.
And this is good. This is a good topic, right? And especially during the season that we've been going through right now. So this is going to be really great. But before we jump into the topic, Jon, for those viewers, those that are with us live, or those that are joining us later on the podcast, Just give us a little background. What are you doing in ministry? What have you done? A little bit about your family. And I saw some pictures on Facebook. Man, you girls are growing up fast, bro. And but yeah, just introduce yourself to the audience real quick.
Yeah, man. Thanks, Aaron. And Chris Estrada, I don't know if you're ever going to watch this, but man, I'm bummed that you're not on this week. And I don't know how. I don't know how I could possibly fill your shoes, but I'm looking forward to when you are on. So, and Aaron, thanks. Peter, thanks, man. Love you guys.
Absolutely.
Love what you're doing. So I'm a next gen pastor at Journey Church in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Yes, we are now on the map, but for all the wrong reasons. But man, God's doing some awesome things here in Kenosha as a result. And so I'm thankful and even looking forward to sharing a little bit of that with you today to maybe encourage you. But we've been here for, my wife and I are celebrating this month 19 years at Journey Church. It's the first and only church that we've served at right out of college. So we were engaged before I came on staff here, and then we got married here at Journey Church, and have been here 19 years. Started off as assistant youth pastors, and then middle school pastors, and then took over the entire youth ministry, and now oversee next gen 0 to 30 across 4 different campuses, including one in Lithuania, and then also another one coming in Racine, Wisconsin. And so I oversee our teams that lead those areas. We have an incredible team here at Journey Church across all the campuses. So it's a kind of like an apostle type role where I get to just cheer them on and encourage them and help resource them to do what they do best. And so kind of like a pastor to the youth pastors now, which I love. So
That's awesome.
Well, that's so good.
You know, I said John is you're the George Clooney, the young George Clooney of Next Gen Ministry.
So good, dude.
Come on, man. I'll take it.
You know, one of the things we love to do as a part of Lead the Generation is we love to just inspire and encourage longevity. And so having a guy like you be a part of LTG Live today is amazing because, like you said, you've been there for 19 years. It's the only church you've ever known and served in this particular role. And so, bro, I just want to honor you and affirm you for your longevity and for staying there and growing deep roots, right? And I'm sure, and I know because we've been friends for quite a while, but I know that there's been seasons where it's been hard and seasons where you probably considered throwing in the towel, but you've pushed through it, man. So thank you for doing that for your wife, your girls, the students in youth ministry, the many men and women of God that you've raised up and have launched into ministry from just a great place of longevity in ministry. So yeah, man, I appreciate that and seeing that in you and in your leadership. And I know that Peter wants to follow in your footsteps, right? He's just like, let me just let.
That is awesome. Unbelievable. 19 years. Come on.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So good. So good. So, John, man, you said to me yesterday when we were texting, you said, hey, I'd love to talk about growing grit, like growing in your leadership grit, even during the difficult seasons. And you, you've obviously shared in the same difficult season that we've all been in with COVID in 2020. But you also had the added challenge of dealing with some of the recent protests and riots that happened right there in Kenosha, right there in your backyard. And so you're going to talk about both of those things a little bit. And so I'm just going to let you jump in and just kind of introduce this topic. And then Peter and I are going to interrupt you and ask questions. And those of you that are watching on the live stream, we'd love for you to do the same thing. The way you do that is just by dropping a comment, putting your question in the comments. And as we see them come in, we'll post those questions here on the live stream. We'd love for all of you that are watching live to be a part of this conversation as well. But John, go ahead and jump in and talk to us a little bit just about this idea of growing in your grit as a leader.
Yeah, man. Obviously, as you guys both know, you don't stay somewhere or last somewhere for 19 years without having some of that grit, right? I mean, a couple months into youth ministry here, I felt like quitting, and maybe you lasted longer. Maybe it was only a year, or it was 5 years or whatever, but we're going to have moments in ministry that we're going to feel like quitting. You think about John the Baptist in Luke chapter 11, right? We know Luke chapter 11, verses 28 through 30 real well. Come to me, all who are weary and burdened and carrying big weights. And previous up to that part of the passage, it was John the Baptist who had been thrown into prison, and he's sending his disciples to go, hey, is that really like, are you really Jesus? Are you really the Messiah, the promised one? Because I don't know if I signed up for the right thing here. Like, I want to make sure I'm giving my life to the right thing. 1 second. Excuse
Sneeze
me.
break.
Got
It's all good.
Man, got something in my throat. It's that young man George Clooney throat going on. That's what it is. But Jesus goes into this whole thing about, hey, maybe getting into ministry isn't what you expected. People aren't responding the way you expected. People are coming against you. People are persecuting you. People are mocking you. And then he gets done with that whole soliloquy in response to Peter's disciples. Excuse me, guys. And then he goes into, come to me, all who are weary, all who are burdened, all who are carrying heavy weights that you were never meant to carry, and I will give you rest. And so Jesus himself went through and faced this. And so we're going to have those moments in ministry that are difficult, but that's why Jesus says, come to me, and we have to learn to do that. So yeah, obviously this has been a year for all of us.
Yeah.
And man, we have new challenges, and we've had to adjust and pivot and figure out how to do ministry in new ways. And honestly, I love it. I think it's exciting. My entrepreneurial spirit is going through the roof. Like, let's go. Let's try new things. We needed to kill sacred cows, and we needed to like do new things, and we needed to get outside the walls of the church, and we needed to innovate anyways. So I'm loving it. And yet it's taken its toll, me, and probably on you guys and those of you who are listening in some major ways. And to be honest with you, I mean, this is growing grit. Eran has kind of been a theme of my whole entire life. I have not asked for that. Everybody wants grit, but nobody wants to go through the process of growing it.
Right.
It just takes good.
It sounds great. I'll take it. You
Yeah.
know, is that like a multivitamin I can take every morning? That would be great.
Yeah. The quick and easy fix, right? Like in 5 minutes a day, you can grow grit, right?
I'm showing my age right now that because I take vitamins. Peter doesn't even know what those are yet. He's still doing Flintstone like chewy gummy bears there.
Hey, don't knock the gummy bears, man.
Yeah, so I didn't sign up for it. I didn't ask for it, but ever since the age of 14, I've had a disease called ulcerative colitis, and in and out of emergency rooms, hospitals. 6 years ago, I went through 5 surgeries in 1 year to remove my colon because 23 years of having this disease in my body, it was bad. And so ministry life all the way from age 14 through college, our 19 years here. Well, it hasn't been 19 because 6 years ago, I had these 5 surgeries, and they removed my colon. They removed this disease, which was really like hell on earth in my stomach. And it was sapping all my energy and resources, and they removed all of that. And for the first time in my life, I'm not taking these experimental meds. I'm not in and out of emergency rooms. I don't have this disease sapping all of my energy. And so that was awesome. I mean, I'm just telling you, it was the hardest year of my life to go through those 5 surgeries. And yet the after effect it's been amazing. And I feel personally, I felt to remove that from my body. So it's really been a lifetime of that. But with all of that said, you go through 5 surgeries in a year, and you can probably imagine, you don't have to have a very big imagination. I had this massive aversion to pain after that. Like I didn't want to have my blood drawn. I mean, I was a wuss. Like I'm just like, if it hurts, I don't want it. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't want anyone to cut me. I don't want a blister. I don't want to stub my toe. Like pain to me, after going through all of that pain for 23 years and then excruciating pain with all those surgeries. I mean, they cut my stomach open. Like it's like I have a 20-inch scar from my midsection down, where they removed the colon, and it was a lot, so I just didn't want pain. So I kind of wrapped myself in a cocoon, in bubble wrap. And I'm like, okay, if it's painful, and I'm not just talking like even just stubbing my toe or surgery, I'm talking painful experiences. And now I can kind of draw back and live in comfort, live in this bubble wrap and be happy. But what that did, what I didn't realize is that I'm now, I'm kind of avoiding anything that might be painful in my life. And so the last 6 years, I just realized, I actually we were in the couple months in, I think it was like a month and a half in, and I realized like I missed out on some things, some massive growth, honestly, in my life over the last 6 years, because I was afraid. I was afraid to go on the flow rider with my kids at the water park. That was one where I was just like, what's wrong with me? Like, I don't even want to jump in the pool with my kids. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that was actually a holy moment that I realized and recognized my response. I realized and recognized my aversion to pain, and I would run from anything that was uncomfortable or a new experience I was becoming. And I realized that I had grit and mental toughness was not a part of not just my personal life, but my ministry experience. And I just gotten comfortable. And so I was like, you know what? Enough's enough. No better time to grow grit. And I had read actually over the course of the year leading up to books on grit, several different books. And I was like studying grit. I wanted to grow it in my kids, and I'm not even willing to grow it in myself.
Yeah.
And so anything I could find on the subject, I'm reading about it. And I think maybe that's why the conviction was rolling as I'm reading, like, I need to grow this in me. And grit isn't something that we have to go through 23 years of sickness to gain. It's not something that we're born with. Mental toughness is something that you can actually grow in your life, but you have to grow it through pain, right?
So John,
you have to go through tough experiences, and
walk us through that.
Doesn't happen. Just go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. And every once in a while, your feed cuts out on us. It's kind of weird. So if I wave at you, it probably just means we kind of lost your audio, and you might have to back up a couple seconds. But walk us through that, as like what are some of the things that stand in the way, or some of our natural responses when we're dealing with pain? Because I as I listen to your story, I just think, boy, we can all relate to the concept of experiencing pain. We might not be able to relate specifically to your story and the physical challenges that you went through, but we can relate to the challenges of, boy, this is a difficult season. I think everyone now, especially this year, relates to the idea of wanting to go to sleep in bubble wrap, or feeling like all the bubble wrap has been popped. Right. So what are some of your thoughts for the leaders that are out there listening that are saying, boy, I'm connecting with this content, and I need to develop some grit in my life? Walk us through some of the steps and some of the things that you learned.
Yeah, well, first you asked the question, what are some of the ways that we respond, right? I think a lot of us can have pain avoidance, right? We get into a season like this, and we can wrap ourselves in bubble wrap. I call it the flight mechanism, right? We all want to kind of run away or avoid or hide or check out or procrastinate. And I'm guessing all of us have faced at least that temptation over the last 9+ months, right? The flight, the proclivity inside of us to run away, that flight mechanism. And that's hardwired into even animals, right? Like you got the different animal responses. Like if danger's coming, I'm going to run, I'm going to hide, I'm going to run away. So then there's the fright mechanism that a lot of us have, where we hit moments of stress, we hit moments and we freak out, right? I think about a famous character who went through that. Is, we saw this with Miley Cyrus. Actually, I'm forgetting her real name. Help me out. We know it's Miley. Yeah,
Miley
Cyrus.
Yeah,
that's the real name. Her fake name is Hannah Montana. Yeah. Don't ask me.
Hannah Montana. There you go. So, right, like she just freaked out when life got hard and the stress and the pressure of what she was doing. She just kind of went haywire. Like she just freaked out and acted a fool. And our emotions get the best of us. Maybe we have moments when stress hits that we freak out at our kids or our spouse, or we respond in a way in ministry. And so those painful moments, if we've not grown mental toughness and grit, we can tend to have that fright response. But then there's people that you watch them go through tough time, and the fight response. LeBron James is a perfect example of that. The dude is a fighter. I think of Kobe, right? The Black Mamba, the Mamba mentality, which that book is on my read list here for 2020.
Yes.
But I think that there's people that rise to the charge. They rise in the moment, and they rise up, and they don't run and they don't fight, or they don't fight others, but they fight back, right? When the pressure's on, they step up and they shine. And I like to study people like that. That's why that book is on my list, because those people inspire me. Those people inspire the world. And that doesn't happen by accident. I used to think that people were born with that there's certain people that just have grit and there's people that don't, but you can grow grit. And it really comes through going and really, like, if you want to grow, you actually have to put yourself in difficult situations to grow it. And so one of the things I came across, Aaron, you asked the question, how do we do that? For me in this season, I started it on May 1st. I did this program called 75 Hard. And the author, Andy Frisella, of the program has a podcast on it. I would just say, don't listen to it around your kids. He uses some pretty choice language. He's got a book on it. You can just Google Andy Frisella, 75 Hard. But he also studied this for over 20 years, this subject of grit. And it's a program. It's a physical challenge. There's the physical piece to it. You do 2 workouts a day. They have to be 45 minutes each, no less than. One of them has
you
to.
lost me at 2. You lost. I'm trying.
Yeah. So you're doing 2 45-minute workouts a day, every single day for 75 days. One of them has to be outside. Why? Because you can't control if it's going to rain or if it's going to snow, and being in the north, like you can't control the weather. So grit is not something that's predictable. Growing grit, you have to just deal with whatever it hands you that day. So I have done outdoor workouts when it's sleeting out, when it's raining out. I've done outdoor workouts when I've gotten to the end of a very, very crazy day of ministry, and it's 1 o'clock in the morning and nobody in their right mind is outside, but I am. And there's something that sucks about that. And then there's something that's so invigorating about that, to go, nobody's crazy enough to do what I'm doing right now. Like, right. I'm proud. You know what? I am going to pat myself on the back right now, because I'm doing something that nobody's willing to do. And so it's 2 workouts a day. One of them has to be outdoors. It's drink a gallon of water a day. It's read 10 pages of a self-development or leadership book a day. It's follow a diet plan, no cheat meals, chip. You got to go back to day 1. And so all of these mental toughness, these grit growing experiences, and yes, there was a massive physical transformation in 75 days. And I love it. I love the results. But sure. I wish I could take a before and after of my mind. Like, what happened in my head is far greater. The confidence, the strength, the mental fortitude, and the mental toughness that was grown in me during that period of time was off the charts. And honestly, I believe that it was God breathed that I came across this program and that I did it when I did it, because it was really a setup. I was sharing this with you, Aaron. It was a setup for what happened in Kenosha. When that hit, it was unexpected. None of us expected that, especially not Kenosha.
Right.
And, you know, already exhausted from COVID and everything that had gone on and everything that had gone on with George Floyd. I mean, we were just exhausted from everything. And the Holy Spirit whispered to me the next day after the riots really kind of blew up here in Kenosha. And he said to me, he said, "Do you think that 75 hard was just a grit growing experience for your life and that it was a physical challenge? But it was so much more. I brought you through that experience to prepare you for a moment like this."
Wow.
And I was like, okay, here we go. I'm going to step up. And I don't know how I would have responded, but I wonder how I would have responded had I not been through that 75 hard challenge. I wonder if I would have been ready. I wonder if I would have crawled back in the bubble wrap and not stepped up, if I would have gone into pain aversion mode, the flight mode, or the freak out mode. But there was a fight that rose up inside of me, guys, and I am so thankful. I know that it was yay for results. It's more about what God was preparing me for. And so I would just say that's one of the ways that I know that's worked personally for me to wade into growing grit. Like we can let it happen by accident, or we can say, hey, well, I'm not going to go through a sickness or disease like that, or 5 different surgeries. But there is programs like that, and there's great resources, books out there that teach you how you can grow grit in your life, and I would recommend that one highly. So
John, let me interrupt you real quick, because Peter has a couple questions. And let me just say before you start asking some questions, Peter, those of you that are watching online, welcome. We're so glad you're here. We're talking with Jon Brown, who's the next gen pastor at Journey Church in Kenosha, Wisconsin. And he's talking about his personal journey with developing grit as a leader. And I'm sure, John, in the second part of our broadcast here, you're going to talk a little bit more about the riots that took place in Kenosha and how God used you and the grit you had already developed for that. Peter, let me kick it to you, because I know you were wanting to get in there and ask some questions to John real quick. And for those of you that are watching live, you got questions for John, feel free to drop it in the chat right now. We'd love to interact with you that are with us live as well. Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, John, that first point on grit is not predictable. I think that a lot of people, especially when we're talking about ministry, right? It's because there's and I know the correlation is kind of a stretch, but you're trying to operate and be gentle and sensitive. And how do you develop grit without becoming aggressive? You know what I mean? Because I feel like, for me, someone who, even when you were just talking about those 3 modes, the flight, the fright, or the fight, I'm like, oh yeah, I want to fight. You know what I mean? And when you want to fight, it's not like I can just, in this one area of my life, I'm going to be determined. It kind of bleeds into everything else. And I'm like, you know what? And we're going to do this better. And we're going to go here. And so how do you develop grit without becoming aggressive as a leader? Right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, we love to follow strong leaders. We all watched Michael Jordan's documentary, right? The Last Dance. And I think that's an example. I was actually kind of saddened when I heard all the things that people, he's just flat out mean. And he's
that's what I mean.
Kind of like, dude, you're tarnishing his legacy, bro. Like, come on, and yet, the reality is we have to manage that tension in ministry. Right. I would say the first bunch of years of my life, I have some moments that I regret in ministry. I wasn't kind. I wasn't soft. I wasn't gentle. I was driven towards excellence. I'm a type A personality. I rolled some people, guys. I bulldozed some people, and I don't want to be that kind of a leader. I want to be a life-giving leader. And so I think, how do we balance or manage that tension? Is that the question you're asking, Peter?
Yeah.
Am I understanding that correctly? Yeah, it's important to grow grit inside of us and to have that fight mechanism, but remember what fight we're fighting, right? We're fighting not against flesh and blood, but we're fighting against powers and principalities. And so the people that we're doing ministry with, for me, I don't know if this is the answer that you're looking for, but it came back to me clearly defining my values. One of my values is I want to live my life. So when I was steamrolling, you can see it. There's a thing behind me. You can't see it. I'm in the way. but I actually have it on a table behind me. My life mission statement: live life to give life. And my values are: I want to be an encourager. I'm a shepherd. I'm an encourager. I'm a mentor. I'm a coach. I'm a consultant. I'm a communicator of the gospel. And my values help me to redefine how I was leading. So yes, I say I want to be an encourager, but the way I'm leading is not encouraging. I'm actually hurting people. So when I got those in alignment, and here's the other way, bro, I found that I lead out of the steamroll, take over type A personality when I'm not taking care of my soul. And so I would say one of the ways that I've combated that is slowing down to take care of my soul. I just had a 2-day soul keeping retreat where I just slowed down. I got poured into. I spent time with Jesus. I listened to his voice, and that helps me to be a better version of myself. I show up better when I'm doing that on a regular basis. So,
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's really helpful.
I have a question, and and I want to direct it to you, Peter, just because I know a little bit about your story and some of the things that you've overcome in your life, and even recently some challenges you and your wife have overcome. How did God use some of those circumstances in your life to develop grit in you as a youth pastor? Speak to all the youth pastors that are out there right now, going through COVID together, all going through a lot of the same challenges in regards to ministry. But I think that God's probably uniquely positioned you, Peter, in a similar way as he's positioned John. I'd just be interested to get your thoughts.
Yeah. I think, man, I think for me, as far as grit goes and being steadfast and just kind of standing strong, if you will, that's like my grit equals stand strong. I really value the principle of innovation. Like, I think innovating is really cool. And I think innovation only happens, or not only happens, but the best way to innovate is to bring solutions. And for solutions to take place, there has to be problems and challenges. And so I think in me, the way the Lord's allowed that is that when I run into difficult things that require grit, I also try to recognize that this also requires innovation, whether it's me innovating myself or my relationship. Like, hey, we have to pray differently. We have to think differently about this time and this moment between me and my wife. Or if just in ministry, I'm like, this is a time for us to get to the next level. Like, this is a tough challenge. Therefore, we have to see things differently. So one of my life statements is don't see things as they are, see them as they should be. So this is a really great opportunity for me to like, okay, just even if I can't find the strength necessarily, I'm not thinking like, oh, I need to have grit concerning the situation. I'm going, what should this be? And that stirs my heart. That inspires me. I don't have to look anywhere else. I don't have to, like, I am stirred because I have a picture of what this is actually supposed to look like. And that's where my grit comes from. So in a ministry context, when things get difficult, like during COVID and during, between all the racial talks and things that are happening in our country between politics, I'm saying to myself, well, what should this be? And what should the church be doing? And what should the church be saying? And then I try to work from that place. And that, I guess that's where the determination, the grit comes from, for me anyway. Yeah.
So good. Yeah, that's so good. Well, so John, continue on with your story. Would you do that? I mean, you talked a lot about just a 19-year challenge, and more than that, really, with your health and how God used that in a lot of ways to prepare you in leadership. And you come into COVID, and you're dealing with the same challenges that we're all dealing with as far as ministry and quarantine and adapting and pivoting and all these new words. I think it's funny how many times we all use the word pivot now. We never used it once in our life. Now it's like our go-to word. You're just finally maybe starting to see like the light at the end of the tunnel in regards to COVID. And then all of a sudden, the Jacob Blake shooting happens right there in Kenosha, and you guys wake up in the middle of at least what it looked like to me on the news. It looked like a war zone, and you're right there in the middle of it. And all of a sudden, I see you, John, on your Facebook feed out there doing rallies and praying with people and ministering to your community. Tell us a little bit about that story and how your past challenges develop the grit to help you with the current challenges that you guys were facing right there in your hometown.
Yeah. Well, that was one of those challenges. We went and did a prayer walk downtown the very next day after the riots, really the unrest really kind of started to get bad with there. And man, I'm walking downtown, my heart is heavy, and I'm like, God, I don't know how to respond. I'm a white male. I don't want to add fuel to the fire. I don't want to say the wrong thing. Like, what's my place to help? How can I help? How can I serve? What can I do with everything that's going on? And I didn't hear an answer in that moment, but I did say to God, I'm available. If you bring an opportunity, a moment, I'm going to jump at it. I'm going to go all in, and I'm just available. And we had some friends from Minneapolis call up that very next day and say, hey, we were part of some unity of churches that came together at the George Floyd Memorial and baptized people and saw people saved and healed. And we would love to just come and help bring healing, reconciliation work to your city, if you'd have us. And I said, hey, I'm available. I mean, that was it. And we started holding services down there weekly, right at the heart of where everything kind of was born, right outside of our courthouse, in Civic Center Park. That first night we baptized 11 or 12 people, saw,
Wow.
I think 20 something people saved. And it was, I mean, the amount of unity and reconciliation and healing. There was a young lady that was heckling us on a megaphone. It was a black young lady who was very angry and hurting. I don't know her story. I don't know why she didn't want us there, but she definitely didn't want us there during the service. There was a preacher, Dr. Charles Karuku, who was preaching at the time, and she was just yelling and shouting. And youngest that my wife and I are good friends with, she came and just loved on her and heard her story, and she gave her life to Jesus, just through that listening conversation, that understanding her pain. And I got to baptize this young lady. I mean, 5 minutes before she was heckling us, and now she's given her life to Jesus and she's getting baptized in the streets. And I asked her, I said, what does this mean to you? Like, what does this decision mean to you? And she just started bawling. She goes, I just don't understand how he could love me. And hot tears streaming right onto my hands. We saw one of the most prolific live streamers. I mean, he was CJTV. He was live streaming and getting hundreds of thousands of views while it was happening. When like, he was the guy who helped when Kyle Rittenhoff shot the guy in the arm. CJ was the one that helped put a tourniquet. He put his camera down and helped put a tourniquet on the arm. CJ came down to one of the street rallies. He was there. He heard what was going on, and he gave his life to Jesus. I got to pray with the dude to receive Jesus, and one of his buddies as well. We got to pray with him. That was also another one of them, Andrew Mercado. Both of them were, and they've been live streaming all over. They've been in DC and Seattle and Portland. I mean, they've been streaming all of these places. And we got to pray with them. We got to see them receive Jesus. So out of this is crazy stories. I mean, I could keep telling you stories for days, but those are just a few, because I think sometimes we can hear everything that's going on and we can miss, like, God was up to something in Kenosha through that. So
yeah, John, I love that, because I think, like, if the team, if Journey Church would have run from that moment, like if there was flight from you guys in that moment, some of the cool things that happened wouldn't have been possible. And I think it's important for me to hear that. I think it's important for all of us to hear that on the other side of difficult situations are opportunities for moves of God, right? Like there's, right. If I just been listening to this guy, I forget his name. The guy who does Story Brand. His name is Donald Miller. And he's talking just about how, like, in any captivating speech or campaign or sales pitch, there has to be an issue. There's got to be a problem, and people have to connect with that problem, or else they don't care about the solution. And so I love that you guys embrace challenges, that you embrace problems, that you didn't run, that you didn't flight from that moment. because there was awesome stories on the other end of that, stories that could have never been possible if, God forbid, that situation. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying those situations are necessary, but it's just like the way you pivoted in that moment is a really great thing.
We're gonna get a counter. I'm gonna add a
Pivot.
counter, and we're just gonna count every time we use the word. In our school, the school of ministry here at our home church here in Pittsburgh, Allison Park Church, one of the things that we prayed about this week was for revival for our country. And one of the thoughts that came out of our prayer time was that when you go back and study the great revivals of our nation in particular and beyond, there's almost always two common denominators. One is a culture in chaos. Here we are. Right. And the second one is God stirring the hearts of young people. So I'm wondering, and this could go to either to you, Jon, or Peter, or both of you can answer this, but I'm just wondering how are you seeing signs of that in your ministries, in your churches? Are you seeing, I mean, obviously we're all seeing chaos. We've been living in it, but are you seeing signs of that in young people that are ready to step up? And because I think all three of us, I mean, we believe in the next generation. We've given our lives to this. Yeah. And so with all of our heart, I think the three of us, and probably many that are listening, we believe Gen Z is going to be a powerful generation used by God to do incredible things. And my prayer is that this generation will be one that will bring in and see and lead a mighty revival in our country. So this might be steering a little bit away from the grit side, but I don't think it is, because I think that we need grit in order to sustain the work that God wants to do through us, even during the difficult seasons. And sometimes when we talk about revival, we think that's just all glory and that's just easy and and the reality is it's a lot of work and it takes grit, right? Mm-hmm. So I'll shut up now. I wanted to interject that thought and just let you guys take it and run with it.
Yeah, I think.
I'll jump in. Go ahead, Peter.
Oh, go ahead, Jon. So I was just going to say.
Well.
I was just gonna say, you said grit. You said grit for the next generation is not. I don't think it is just about standing in place. I think it's also about going against the grain. And I feel like the next generation, especially the students that are present, in my context in Lansing, Michigan, and Mount Hope Church, like they're not afraid to color outside the lines. Like they're not waiting for me to make a move before they make a move. And I think that's part of the revival that's coming. Is they're saying, I don't need to have a church building to have church. I don't need a baptismal service to baptize in the streets. I don't need, and they're not afraid to color outside the lines. And so I think young people right now are moving at their own pace. They're hungry. They're getting ready to move. And so because they're operating at their own pace, they're not waiting necessarily for me or for the church to kind of figure out what this looks like. We're able to reach more people. And as we're reaching more people, we know people are getting stirred. They want to grow. And I feel like that's where revival's coming from, is young people finding their own pace.
That's so good. I agree. And you know what? Young people are like all of us. They're humans. But I think Gen Z and Gen Alpha, who's following, it's an to them, because I think they already have. I think it's moments like they're seeing in our nation that's growing grit in them. But it's our job as pastors, as next gen leaders, to help grow grit in them. Right? It does not happen by accident unless they've been through hard experiences in their life. And yes, our nation is going through hard times, but I think this needs to change the way we do discipleship, guys. As a parent, just like all of us, I have a proclivity to make it easier on my kids than I had it. Right? Like, well, you know what? School is really hard for me, so I'm going to make it easier on my child. I don't want them to have to fight through, but I had to fight through some junk. I had to fight through some learning disabilities, and it made me who I am. And I'm so thankful for it. And so instead of making it easier on our kids when it comes to the way that we disciple them in our youth ministries, yes, we have a proclivity. Well, I went through this really tough experience, or we went through this church split. Like, those things make us, I'm not saying we should split our churches, but I think we should have conversations around, maybe that's another conversation you have, of how can we change discipleship to not make it easier. Jesus didn't make it easier with discipleship. He said, you got to pick up your cross and follow me. So I think we have to find ways to help them dig in and find the grit that's in them. Stop making it easier. And I think youth pastors tend to do that because why? Because we want bigger numbers. We want more people to show up. And I'm sorry, but Jesus did it with the 12, and he had people walk away from him because it was hard. It was stinking hard to follow him.
Right.
So
yeah, for sure. That's so good, man. So good, because that word that I hear that you didn't say in the midst of not making it easier for them is they've got to take risks. And one of the things that's really marking the pathways that I'm trying to create for discipleship for my students are I'm trying to create decision makers, young people that just don't go with the flow, but they know how to make decisions that truly impact the world around them. And so I'm trying to put my young people in positions to take risks, to make decisions, to be bold. And it's in those bold moments when they feel like, man, I might not have the answer for it, that their grit is formed and determined. I think that's super powerful.
Yeah. So here's a question, guys, and whichever one of you guys wants to answer this, go for it. This is from Tina, and she says, do you guys have any advice for keeping our students engaged with Zoom? We were in person again, and now numbers are rising, COVID numbers she's referring to, and it looks like we may be headed virtual again. And this is one of the challenges, right? Talking about grit, here's one of the challenges. The whole world moved to Zoom, and it worked great the first couple of weeks or months, and then everyone's like, oh, Zoom's terrible. So what are you guys doing, or what advice would you give to Tina or other youth pastors that are listening right now, or maybe later on the podcast, in regards to how to help students stay engaged?
John, go ahead.
I'll jump in. I mean, Peter, you're in the trenches more than I do, but obviously, I have 2 daughters that are in our youth ministry, and I get to be on in the background as a dad, right? And I'll just say it this way. I think we have the false assumption or false security that when they come to our youth ministries that they're engaged. So I think it's the engagement problem is already there. I just think it's harder. Like, they're just not going to show up on Zoom, or they're just not going to be involved. Like, they'll just turn their camera off and be on their phone, right? But they do the same thing when we're live, except for when we give them ownership. If they have ownership in it, right? Good. For example, if there's just a talking head talking to my daughter and they just talk for an hour, I don't even want to sit a call, right? But if you give me ownership, so one of the ways that our small group leaders are doing this, incredible leaders, they'll have, testimony time. Everyone gets a chance to tell their testimony. What is God speaking to you in this time of COVID? And they will have students after student sharing, and they give them time to prepare, and they give them opportunity to get off, take their camera off mute and speak. I'm way more engaged in a conversation like this because I'm participating, right? What we participate in, we own. And if I'm going to own it, I'm going to take care of it. If I don't own it, I'm not taking my rental car for an oil change because I have no ownership in it. It's not mine. Yes, ownership equals engagement. So when I own it, I'm engaged. And so I would just say, Tina, that if you want to get them engaged with Zoom, I would actually get a bunch of your best students in a room and say, hey, let's brainstorm. Let's put it up on the whiteboard. Let's brainstorm it. How can we get everyone more engaged? What are some things you want to do to own this more? And maybe they're the ones leading it, in major ways. So that's the answer that comes to mind.
Yeah, that's the exact answer I was going to give, John. That's perfect. And that's what we're doing right now. Like, honestly, like anything that I want more students to come to, I'm going to let my students take ownership of. Like we just had like a friends night last week in the middle, of this crazy time. And, just a great amount, just great results. Because I said to my students, I said, come up and tell us the 3 most impactful God moments in your life. And I knew some of my students that would, I planted them in the crowd. I'm one of those people. I like to be prepared. But then so many other students that are just like, I want to tell you about my 3 God moments, and students absolutely being rocked. And even in that time, this is something that I'm starting to do at the end, is like leading people into salvation. All right. And surrendering their life to Jesus. I'll invite some of my best students to come up and lead that moment, because there are so many people in that room can see themselves in their friend who's up there leading that moment, and will come willing and openly as to where they might not even come if I'm up there. So.
I
Yeah, it's
think there's
good.
a massive shift that is taking place in youth ministry and our youth ministry models and the approach, and it's a good shift. But for too long we have focused on using our preaching to create listeners rather than creating disciples. And so
Come on.
when we hit COVID, everyone's like, "How do I get people to listen to me?" And it's really the question we're still asking: How do I get people to listen to me? They got to listen to me. They got to listen to me. And so we've like misused that biblical gift
Hmm.
of preaching to like, I need to create listeners. I need to create listeners, rather than creating disciples, which is a much more relational process. And to your point, John and Peter, what you guys are saying, and always includes high.
I think he froze for a second.
Yep. He looks good frozen though.
He does. He does look good frozen. But I was just gonna say, John, what you said though is so important because I feel the strain of it, man. I felt the strain. I felt exposed by COVID when I had to transition everything to online. And like Aaron was saying, like we use all of this stuff to create listeners. And so they're like, so what are we gonna do? And I was like,
Hmm.
why are you guys all looking at me? Like, what are
Yep.
we going to do? You know what I mean? And
Yep.
I think
It's good.
that phrase of just like creating ownership and decision makers, like that's what I'm shooting for. And as the next gen pastor here, like, but heavily involved in our youth ministry still, as we get that rolling, it's like that's my number one goal, is to create leaders who feel like they own this thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And a real everyone else need. I think this is the time, man. We lost Aaron for good, huh?
That's all
I
right.
think this is the time that if you don't have a student leadership program, you need to get one. Why not? Why not launch student leadership through
Let's
Zoom?
go. Yeah.
And I would say get their voice in future teaching series, get their voice in events that you do, get their voice in how to make Zoom exciting. Um, it and get them involved in leadership. They can sniff that out a mile away. Give them high level opportunities to lead, to share their story, to get involved. Come on, Aaron, welcome back. And so student leadership, I think, is a huge key. And pour into them, develop them. Don't just expect things of them, but develop them as leaders. Have them. We launched our student internship this summer as a result of COVID. Our team said, "Hey, we've been dreaming about doing this for the last 2 summers, and busyness and summer camp and everything took over. Let's launch a student high school student internship." And we had 20 students here several days a week, and they went through the Bible study together, the Bible study for students. They went through it. My daughter is still continuing after the summer in her student internship for the summer. She's in 9th grade, and she's still daily doing the Bible study, getting in the Word, and
Awesome.
filling out the workbook. And so our youth pastors and our youth team of incredible volunteers poured their guts into them, and it's showing up now in times like this, because they pivoted, they adjusted, they did what they always wanted to do because they had more time. So get a student leadership team if you don't have one, or innovate it, refresh it, make it more what you want it to be. So, Aaron.
Oh, I was just giving you a point because you used the word pivot. That wasn't. Yeah, I wasn't raising my hand.
Yes, I got
I was
another
like,
point. Come
boom, there
on.
it is, another point. Ding! I'm gonna get a sound effect rolling for that, for future. But hey, this has been a great conversation, and we've had a couple technical challenges. But for those of you that are still watching, thanks for hanging in there with us. And for those of you that listen back on a podcast, you'll hear some of the technical challenges there. But John, it's a lot of great thoughts. Peter, thanks for adding so much value to this conversation.
Yeah.
And this has been good. I think this is challenging for all of us as leaders to seize the opportunity of 2020 and this season of COVID, and say, God, how do you want to develop grit in my life as a leader? I'm reminded of one of my favorite Christine Kane quotes where she says, God is always preparing you for what he's prepared for you.
Come on.
And
Come
so
on.
it reminds me of although I'm uncertain of what the future holds and what ministry looks like, maybe even next week right now, right? I'm uncertain of that. I'm very, very certain that God is always preparing me and doing a work in me. because he who has called me is faithful to complete the work in me.
Yeah.
And so God is doing a work in me to prepare me. I'm certain of that. And so Jon, thanks for jumping on today and for encouraging us and encouraging leaders. And we appreciate it. And this has been a really good conversation for us. Any closing thoughts, guys?
Yeah, I do. If you wouldn't mind, you're just, I love that word, that scripture. I have one as well. James, I consider this one of my life verses, but he says this: consider it a sheer gift, my friends, when tests and challenges come at you from all sides. You know that under pressure, right? That's what we've been feeling. That's what we experienced here in Kenosha. That's what we've been experiencing over this last bunch of months. That's what we're experiencing in our youth ministries, having to innovate, like Tina said, go back to Zoom. You know that under pressure, your faith life is forced into the open and shows its true colors. So don't try to get out of anything prematurely. Let it do its work so that you become mature and well-developed and not deficient in any way. And so I would just encourage you not to run, not to freak out, not to stress out, but to lean in. And I believe that there's treasure in the pressure. There's treasure in the pressure that we have to learn to become treasure hunters in seasons like this. We have to look for, it might be a lot of digging. It might be a lot of mining, but we have to learn to become treasure hunters because there's treasure. What we experienced in Kenosha, I could have rolled over and played dead like a possum, right? Or I could have run, or I could have, there's a lot of responses, but it was like, there was a treasure in there. I didn't know what I was supposed to do or how I was going to respond, but I'm saying, God, I'm available. And there's treasure in the pressure that you're facing right now. And maybe it's that you become more mature. Maybe it's that you become more well-developed, or maybe that it's become that you become not deficient in any way. There's things that God wants to grow in you, but there's also things that he wants to do through you as a result of that pressure. And I believe that we can all be better under pressure. That Absolutely. The best comes out of us under pressure, right? Absolutely. And so, man, I just want to encourage someone with that James was a great reminder that we have to have a different perspective on the pressure that we're facing right now.
Oh, this has been so good. Guys, thanks for joining us so much. Peter, obviously looking forward to being with you again next week with our guest, Steve Tripp will be joining us. Jon, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Jon.
For those of you that are watching this, whether live or later, if you like this content, do us a favor and give us a like on the Lead the Generation Facebook page. Click and share. Send it to some of your friends. We're just out here trying to encourage some youth pastors and some leaders and that are serving faithfully in ministry. And we appreciate this conversation. Jon, thanks for giving us your time today. God bless you, my brother. Peter, I'll see you next week. Hopefully by then we'll be celebrating LeBron's fourth ring.
Absolutely.
And let's go. Great.
Love you guys.
And Jon, this has been so good. And for those of you that are still with us, thanks so much for watching us today.